Hi there, my name is Christina Thomas Kelly, and I will be talking to you about how to differentiate project-based learning and problem-based learning today. So as we know that both PBL systems are designed to engage the 21st century student, and I have a Venn diagram that I pulled from Edutopia that will go through some of the qualities that differentiate them and also have similarities between the two. In a nutshell, they're very similar because they're both active learning. They involve higher level thinking skills and real world authentic problems. But one of the major differences between the two is project-based learning begins with the end in mind, essentially, and there is going to be a final outcome. Where when you think of problem-based learning, it basically talks more about an authentic real-world problem that does not have one right answer, that there can be many different variations, and this type of question can come up again and again. We're going to talk about a lesson that I haven't tried yet. I was inspired by somebody online through a blog, and it discussed a way that she introduced herself to the students at the beginning of the year using primary and secondary sources. So I really liked that idea, and so I have adapted it to something that I would like to do. So as a beginning of the year activity or an icebreaker, as well as setting the stage for the remainder of the year, students will be getting to know the teacher inadvertently through an investigation process. I have attached standards here, so you can click there and actually see the standards that are addressed, and also some materials needed. And materials will be differentiated between the two, but some include primary and secondary sources. And then the student-driven, so some materials just are on a needs-to-be-determined basis. It'll depend on what they actually discover that they need. So at the beginning of the lesson, I'm going to discuss project-based first. So after studying artifacts around the room, you're going to write a narrative biography of the mystery of the person's life. That is the objective. And the mystery person ultimately will be me, but they will get to know me in a different way. So I had some fun with this, and I created a video introduction for this assignment.
Hi there. I am asking for your help. The current detectives cannot identify who I am. They told me I suffer from amnesia. I remember waking up from the hospital and all I had was a backpack with some personal items. It is important I know who I am. Can you help? You are my last hope.
Hi class. As you know, I'm Mrs. Kelly. However, did you know that in the evenings I moonlight as Detective Wildflower? That's right. And I'm asking for your help. We have taken the backpack found from the person who does not know who they are. We've taken it from the evidence locker and have displayed the contents all around the room. You and your team will need to analyze each artifact, designate them as primary or secondary sources, and interpret what each means. After you have developed your theory on who this person is, you will then need to include a narrative of life events or biography. You will be presenting this information to the class, and we will compare these theories. Now, good luck, and don't forget, you will need these skills.
10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, 100% reason to remember the day.
So essentially, when I was designing that idea, I knew it needed an attention grabber, something to add some drama to the project. And they would have different, artifacts all around the room that have been collected through me over time for them to take a look at. The directions are Basically, they need to create a narrative describing who this person is and their life events. So this is a good way for them to get to know me, but also more importantly, to be able to engage in the steps of a project-based system. So I'll go back to the other slide in a minute, but the purpose is defined for the end product and, the narrative of the person. They're going to identify the audience who they're talking to, create a plan for product management, research, produce, present, and reflect. And in doing so, they're going to work collaboratively in groups. They might seek out and find new information. They'll be able to figure out that my apron that says Chili's on it was used by me, and that was my job in college. They'll be going through investigating it, but although they're doing all of this work, they are meeting standards by identifying primary and secondary sources and telling the story of a biography of the person, which is in fact what history is all about, is looking at those artifacts and telling a story. So they're meeting standards, and hopefully this very easy approach will help them as they continue through the learning about different people in history. Now, taking the same idea, but switching the approach would be problem-based, is instead of giving the final outcome, what you're actually doing is giving a real-world question that cannot be answered with, okay, like the project-based, who is the missing person? It's Mrs. Kelly. Where this one, you're actually saying, okay, well, how can different points of view or bias contribute to the author's retelling of events, and how can this apply to the future learning? Now, as we know in history, there are different views of the same historical event. And in history, we perpetuate historical thinking. And at doing this at the beginning of the year, we'll really set the stage for how to actually do this throughout. And hopefully this will become like an anchor for students to continuously come back to. So with this essential question, they would take the question, they would explore the issue, what exactly it means. And again, they'd be doing this in collaborative groups with me as more as the facilitator again, or mediator if needed. They're going to state what they know. They're going to define the issues at hand. They're going to research, investigate, and present and support the chosen solution. Now, again, around the room, I would have these resources, but they would choose which resources to use. Again, going back to that essential question, how can different points of view or bias contribute to the author's retelling of events? So they would go through, they would pick events, they might discover that they need additional information, so they would have to seek out events online, possibly accessing social media, doing, whatever they decide to do because to address that problem. Now, both actually talk about reviewing or reflecting. And, in the module, it had a really great way of putting critical friends, basically being able to give performance feedback or feedback to themselves about how they can better or improve upon a situation. That constant element of reflective learning is constant growth, that's what learning is growing and changing and learning and reflecting. So both of those have key components there. So in planning and designing lessons, we know that when you include both of these PBL approaches, you're going to get a more engaged student. And with engagement leads to motivation, which means leads to learning. It just is a catalyst in best practice, not only in teaching, but in learning. Now, this does take some thoughtful planning, but it's worth it in the end because we want students to have rigor and relevance, and we want them to make meaningful connections and enduring understandings. So when designing your next lesson, I hope you consider including at least one of these approaches in your classroom. Thank you.